Welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Services Delegated Committee. My name is Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth and I chair this committee. Before we commence the meeting, I request that all mobile phones are turned off or sit just silent, please. The Services Delegated Committee meeting is being live streamed on Council's website, so you will be able to view the proceedings of the meeting, council deliberation and voting. The meeting is also being recorded and will be made available on the Council website as soon as practicable after the meeting. Should technical problems be encountered, the meeting will be adjourned until the problem is rectified, and if need be, the meeting will be postponed. I will start proceedings by introducing my fellow councillors and officers. Starting at the horseshoe table to my immediate left is Councillor Victor Franco, Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Nick Stavrou, Deputy Mayor Councillor Wes Gold, Councillor Felicity Simfield, and immediately then to my right is Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Susan Biggart, Councillor Gary Thompson, Councillor Di Gillies, and our Mayor, Councillor Addis. Good evening. The officers in attendance tonight are, to my right, our CEO, Philip Storer, Carolyn McLean, sitting directly behind Councillor Stavrou as our Director of Community Support, and then to my right, behind Councillor Gillies, is Daniel Freer, Director of Places and Spaces, and sitting beside Daniel Freer, and sorry, I'm actually looking. I don't believe a director. It's Mans. Sorry. I don't see our Director of Customer and Transformation at the moment. So on the same table as Daniel Freer is Scott Walker, our Director of Urban Living, and sitting behind Councillor Park is Amy Montalto, the Chief Financial Officer. Directly to my left, we welcome Brian Weir as our Manager of Governance and Legal, and to his left, Helen Pavlivas, Senior Governance Officer. There will be another number of other officers in attendance this evening, and they will be introduced as they present their reports. The purpose of the Services Delegated Committee is to deal with issues relating to the provision of human and physical services and council infrastructure. For those in the gallery presenting this evening, when we come to the agenda item, it will be introduced by an officer. I will then call you one by one to come forward and address council at the end of the horseshoe table. When making a submission, you are requested to present your viewpoint clearly and concisely on why you agree or disagree with the proposal. You may suggest an alternative approach which will satisfy your concerns. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said, and please keep the discussion focused on the relevant issue. There is a limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, and that includes councillors. As chairperson, I reserve the right to vary that. I will ask speakers to stand at the speakers will be sitting at the end of the horseshoe this evening. At the 2.5 minute mark, I will ring a bell, which will indicate that you have 30 seconds remaining, and you will then need to conclude your presentation. After you have spoken, please remain at the table while I ask if any councillor has a question for you. All right, we'll begin with the agenda item. Apologies. Mr. Wee, are there any apologies this evening?
Through you, Chair, no apologies.
Thank you. Item number 1, adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the Services Delegated Committee meeting held on the 11th of April. Councillors, can I please have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes? Councillor Simfield.
So moved.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Addis, thank you very much. Councillor Simfield, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Item 2. Sorry, is there anyone opposed to the minutes? No. And all those in favour of the motion? Thank you very much. Item 2, declaration and conflict of interest of any councillor or councillor officer. Councillor or officers, are there any conflicts that you wish to declare? No, thank you. Item 3, presentation of officers' report. And I'd like to call our Chief Financial Officer, Ms Amy Montalti. And the agenda item is the adjoining of 9 and 11 Weybridge Street in Surrey Hills, proposed sale of land from a previously discontinued right-of-way road.
Good evening, councillors, and through you, Chair. This report is to consider the completion of the statutory procedures for the sale of land adjoining 9 and 11 Weybridge Street, Surrey Hills, including the consideration of 2 written and any verbal submissions received in respect to the proposal. Council, at its meeting held on the 15th of November 2021, resolved to commence the statutory procedures to sell the land from the previously discontinued road adjoining 9 and 11 Weybridge Street, Surrey Hills, to the adjoining property owners in accordance with Council's policy on a longitudinal basis as shown in the draft plan of subdivision in attachment 3 of the papers that you have before you. Pursuant to the provisions of Section 114 of the Local Government Act 2020, a notice advising of Council's intentions was published in the Age newspaper and on Council's website on the 24th of November 2021. The notice also stated, as part of its community engagement process, Council was inviting submissions on the proposal, and any submissions received would be considered by Council in accordance with the principles of Section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989. Written submissions have been received from both adjoining property owners at 9 and 11 Weybridge Street, Surrey Hills, and both submitters have requested to be heard in support of their submissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, we have 3 presenters here this evening, so I'd like to call our first presenter, and it's Christopher McLeod. Would you like to come and please take a seat? Good evening, Christopher. If you wouldn't mind, please, by just stating your name. You don't have to actually declare your physical address, although it is obviously relevant to the agenda item. But if you could please state your name and confirm your suburb, please.
Yes, Chris McLeod, 11 Weybridge Street, Surrey Hills.
Thank you. And please begin. But I'll just remind you, at the 2.5-minute mark, I'll ring the bell, and then I'll let you know when the 3 minutes has expired.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for coming out for the one item.
Oh, and sorry, could you just state, are you in support of?
I'm against the proposed current split, and I have an alternate proposal. I'm here representing my wife, Andrea, who owns the house that we reside in at 11 Weybridge Street. We have a written submission that's been put forward. Andrea put in a submission, and I assume you've read that. But in essence, it was originally proposed that the lane between 9 and 11 would be split in a latitudinal basis, front and back. And we thought that was best because then both landowners would get a decent chunk of land that they could do something with. So we accepted the offer. I think it was $67,000 to buy the front half that was offered, and we thought that was reasonable, particularly because we've got quite an established piece of land, so it's hard to integrate a skinny piece of land onto our property. And we're not really a knockdown, so it's a skinny piece of land probably doesn't have a lot of value. In any event, Council's delegates, I think, after representations from lawyers for the adjoining owner, decided it was better to offer the land on a longitudinal basis for $97,000 each, such that each adjoining owner would get quite a skinny piece of land. Now, the difficulty for us is it just isn't worth $97,000. The whole is certainly worth 200,000 or odd. There's no doubt about that, because you can do quite a bit with a full lane. But a skinny piece of land doesn't add that much value to a house, and it would just be it would be an irrational thing to accept that offer. Might add 20 or 30,000, whereas the whole would be worth, say, 200. So what we propose, or what we think would be the better outcome, is if we understand the adjoining owner and us both want to buy the whole piece of land, because that's more valuable for both. And we're concerned that if the land's divided, no matter how it's divided, if it's divided latitudinally, the adjoining owner didn't want to purchase the other half, fair enough, didn't want to do that. If it's divided longitudinally, it makes no sense for us to purchase half either. And we think the process needs to be fair as between both owners, and it shouldn't be able to, this process shouldn't engineer an outcome where whoever's offered, or however it's split, that only one neighbour can effectively buy the lot, because if it's divided in this basis, the adjoining owner will buy the half and then inevitably buy the whole. If it was divided the way it previously was, it would be the same thing. So what we propose, and what we think is fair and fair to council, is if each owner has a fair and even opportunity to buy the whole lot, because we both want to buy the whole lot, rather than having a very random, however it's divided, whether that's by auction, by tossing a coin, by each person putting in one bid only above the reserve, and the highest bid gets it. I'm not sure, but we think that's the fairest outcome for everyone and good for taxpayers.
Thank you, McLeod, and right on your 3 minutes. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Councillors, sorry, if you wouldn't mind staying in your seat, please.
Certainly.
Councillors, any questions for Mr McLeod? Councillor Biggar, thank you.
Thank you. I just wondered, were you offered or were you ever interested in the north, if it was split latitudinally, the north half or the back half? I understand you accepted and were interested in the south, but had you considered, or would you consider accepting the north were it to be divided latitudinally?
Yeah, it was never offered to us. We always expressed interest in the south half, because we wanted to get some off-street parking, particularly for our daughters. We've now got 3 cars, so it's a bit of a jumble. And we thought that, wrongly, that the back half might suit the neighbours, because they're quite a new home and have a pool, and we thought they could do more with the back. At the back of our property, where we've got a pool and we've got some big trees, and the back bit is not as valuable. I admit that if it was split latitudinally, I think the back part is worth less than the front, I would say, because it doesn't have any frontage. But we saw that as giving each owner an appropriate amount. We thought the other adjoining owner would want it, but they don't, and that's fair enough. But it's clear that both owners would like the whole lot, and we just want each of us to have, in our view, we should each have that opportunity.
So it was never offered to you because you wouldn't be interested in it? Is that fair?
I don't think we ever said we don't want it, but we said our preference was to have the street frontage, and that was how it was dealt with, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Biggar. Councillor Addis.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your presentation. Just wanted to clarify that your position is you want all of it or none of it, effectively.
If it was divided latitudinally as originally proposed, that would be okay. But again, that would seem also, I think that's probably unfair as well, because it would mean that we would inevitably buy the lot. I guess ideally, if we both had new blocks or whatever, or ours wasn't established, splitting it down the middle probably would be fair. But it's just if we buy it, it's not going to add that much value to the land. It might add, I don't know, not much. It wouldn't be 97,000, so you can't build on it, and it would give us a little bit extra garden. That's all. So, yeah.
Okay. Look, thank you. We might get the officers to clarify whether that's what you're suggesting is actually a possible option. Thanks.
Thank you.
So they'll do that later.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Franco.
Could I just clarify, is your first best preferred position that we put the parcel as a whole up for auction between you and your neighbour?
Yes, or some other way, whether it's drawing of lots or whatever council likes, as long as we each get a fair and even opportunity to get the whole lot, which is what we both want. There'll be someone disappointed at the end of it, but, I think that would be the fairest outcome, rather than, if you're dividing it that way, we win the whole lot. If you divide it that way, they win the whole lot. That doesn't seem fair to me anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Park.
Thank you. I presume you've seen the officer's recommendation that's before us?
To divide it latitudinally? Yes. Yes.
I note that
sorry, longitudinally. Yes, sorry. I always get confused.
the paragraph 5 in brackets 4 refers to removal of the vehicle crossover. Based on what you've said tonight, I presume that that would be an issue for you, because you effectively would want to maintain that crossover. Am I understanding that correctly?
If it was sold as a whole, I would imagine both parties would, yes. When you're talking the crossover, you're talking about the driveway? Yes.
Correct, yeah.
Yes, I think both would.
So would it be fair to say that if it was a condition of the sale that the crossover had to be removed, then your interest would diminish or cease?
Look, I haven't thought about that. Is the crossover a big problem? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, in the report, it's given as one of the positive outcomes of doing this, in that it will provide an extra on-street bay.
Oh, okay. Yes. If I'd imagine whoever buys the land, if it was sold as a whole, I think one advantage would be that there would be more cars taken off the street. At the moment, there are, I think, too many cars in the street. So I think, at least for our part, we'd probably have a carport at the front or something. But yes.
Okay, thank you.
You would have seen too previously, the council, previously thought that there was a great idea to divide it in the other way as well, latitudinally, but and keep the drive.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. I don't see any other lights on, so there are no further questions. If you wouldn't mind going back to the gallery, and we'll
Thanks
call
very much.
now. Thank you. Tony Remming, if you'd like to come forward, thank you.
Thanks, councillors. Councillors, I wonder...
Sorry, I was going to say, would you like to take your seat and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. So Tony Rownick is my name. I'm a lawyer.
Right.
I'm appearing for the owners of 11 Weybridge Street. I do have a plan that I'm happy to hand out if that is helpful for councillors.
If you don't mind waiting there.
Yes.
Thank you. And while we're waiting for that to come forward to the screen, I'll...
Most of them are A3, but in case we need some more, I've got enough for myself, yeah.
Mr. Remick, I'll just remind you that you have 3 minutes for
Sure.
the presentation. Thank you.
So thank you, councillors. Also, I'd like to thank the council officers for their professional conduct to the matter and the conscientious way they've handled this to date. I am a managing partner of Hunt & Hunt Lawyers. We run a local government practice, but I'm also a former councillor and mayor at the Shire of Nillumbik, so I know you're very busy people with lots of demands on your time, so I'll try and make this as short as possible for you. My submission tonight is essentially that it's a much more sensible option to pursue the longitudinal basis. We certainly heard from the next door neighbour about the concern about how would we divide this land if we did it on a latitudinal basis, and it creates, the proposition was that that would be a fair and more equitable position. I think that that's absolutely not the case. We'll either have the party with the deepest pocket, we'll get the front portion that abuts Weybridge Street, given that both parties have a preference for that portion. And let me say that the next speaker is an engineer who's done a report on behalf of my client who sees some real challenges with that latitudinal division. But also, if we have a draw the names out of a hat, then someone's going to be unfortunate there. If you see in the plan in front of you, there's diagram 2 representing one option where the number 11, my client, gets the front portion of abutting Weybridge Street. There's diagram 3, the option where the neighbour does, and then the preferred option is the more equitable division. This is consistent with the treatment of the right-of-way throughout the rest of the area, and also consistent with the way that council have, beg your pardon, there's more there, the way that council have divided right-of-ways in the vicinity. It's also the safest outcome, and let me say, my client wants to get rid of the crossover, does not want to park their car, and there is that challenge at the moment where there is the issue with pedestrians and other vehicles that other vehicles face when cars, and I've got a photograph here, what we're finding is there are neighbours in the vicinity who are parking their car in the right-of-way. We're also finding that tradespeople in the area are choosing that as a location to park their car, even to have their lunch or smoko breaks. So it's often got a vehicle parked there. The proposed longitudinal division will also improve the appearance of the streetscape. If the crossover is eliminated, we can have the nature strip extended, and that's certainly my client's desire to see that improved streetscape, that improved security for the neighbourhood in terms of people accessing the laneway for any inappropriate activity, dumping rubbish at any point. The bottom line is that my client would be certainly prepared to buy the whole site if it became available, but is very happy to share equally with the neighbour. There are a number of further engineering reasons why this longitudinal division ought to be supported, and I'd defer to Mr Horan from Robert Bird Group, who will speak to that in a moment.
Thank you. And you've still got 30 seconds. Would you like to say any more, or have you concluded your presentation?
Well, councillors, if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them. We genuinely feel that that any other division of the laneway will have significant engineering issues, and I think you'll hear that from Mr Bird, but also I think it's going to create a precedent for you, and I know I'm a lawyer, but I've been a councillor. You'll have situations where neighbours will want to take these rights of way to basically have additional access points to roadways, and you're going to have that preservation of that conflict with pedestrians.
All right, thank you very much. Now, if you don't mind staying there, please. Mayor Adders, would you like to ask a question?
Thanks very much. Thanks for your presentation. Can I just clarify whether you're representing 11 on 9? I thought you said both, and I'm...
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I slipped of the tongue. My client is 9 Weybridge Street. Mr McLeod, who spoke earlier, is number 11. And apologies, Mr McLeod. I gave you the wrong number.
Thank
you, Councillor Adders.
And your preference is the officer's recommendation, essentially?
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Park.
So with it is the suggestion that the crossover's closed up. Are your clients satisfied with that, if that was a condition?
That's what the officer's report recommends. We're very comfortable with that proposition, and we think that it'll provide a better aesthetic streetscape and a safer streetscape.
No further questions? Thank you. You may return to the gallery.
Thanks, councillors.
Now I'd like to call Daryl Haran. Good evening, Daryl. Thank you. Now I'm sure you're probably aware, but you have 3 minutes to conduct your presentation, and then at the end of the presentation, if you could please stay in the seat and see if there's any questions from councillors. Can you please state your name and suburb, please?
My name's Daryl Horan. I'm a civil engineer. I live in McKinnon.
And you're here representing the client, is that correct?
Number 9, yes.
Number 9, thank you. All right. And sorry, can I just ask, in support or opposition of the officer recommendation?
In support of the officer's
In support of the officer recommendation. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. So I was asked to take a look at this because the original latitudinal division was apparently suggested for technical reasons. So I went to site and had a look at the laneway and the drainage therein, and I've had a look at the asset records available. And in my opinion, there is no technical reason why you couldn't subdivide the land longitudinally. In fact, I further suggested in my technical memo that dividing it in a latitudinal manner would be disadvantageous in that you would be creating another boundary, another fence line across the easement, which would further restrict access to council's drain in future if they needed it. And also the existing location of the drain, as evidenced by the pits that are there, appears to be very close to the fence line of number 11 as it stands. So having the laneway divided latitudinally would keep at least half of that boundary with the pipe very close to the fence line. By fencing in the middle along a new boundary, you would actually get more clearance to the pipe as it stands, which would be beneficial for access in the future for council's drain. I also noticed that the drainage pit that is there at the moment, council's drainage pit, is at the rear of the laneway and on the side of number 11, and also that there appears to be a pipe discharging under the fence of the laneway from number 11 at the rear of the site. If, and again, it's against my recommendation of a longitudinal split, but if it was to be split in a latitudinal way, I would suggest that number 11 would actually be better having the rear half of the site, because that pit would be more accessible if it was in the property of number 11, and that existing pipe that discharges into the laneway would be wholly within the site of number 11. And that's all I have to say. It's quite short and sweet.
Thank you very much. Councillors, any questions? There are no questions, so if you'd like to go back to the gallery, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, there's no more presenters this evening? No. So we'll go over to Ms Montague.
I have nothing further to add, thank you.
Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Park.
Given what I've heard tonight, I'm interested to hear why officers don't think it should just be put to auction with the two adjoining property owners invited to bid for the whole lot, with a view to maximising the return to ratepayers on what's clearly valuable land.
Thank you. We'll go to our Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you. Through your chair. Council's policy on this thus far has been to achieve what it might describe as a fairer outcome by providing both owners with the opportunity to actually acquire the land. That's how Council has typically dealt with these issues. There's nothing in that policy to prevent you from doing what's being proposed this evening. It is just that it comes, I guess, at the issue from the perspective of how do we produce a fair outcome for both owners, and that is to offer each of them the opportunity to acquire some additional land. In this case, it would seem that whichever way this goes, there is potentially an unhappy party, in the sense that if it goes to one of them in its entirety, there'll be an unhappy party. If it goes to an offer to each of them, and one party doesn't want to take their share of that land, then that party will also be unhappy. So that's really the best advice I can offer you. There's nothing to prevent that outcome. What is in the policy exists for reasons of fairness.
Thank you. And just to follow up, do officers see that if council approaches the issue in terms of the recommendation, we might well have a situation where the second portion of the land doesn't have an immediate buyer, and therefore the value would be much less, and that's a significant risk given everything that we've heard tonight.
Yes, we do have examples around the city where only one owner has purchased land in these circumstances, and the remainder remains in council's ownership. That normally remains that way until such time as there is a property transfer, when a new owner may be interested in acquiring that land, but that could take some time to pass. So that outcome can and does arise on occasion with our current approach. We would then have the ongoing responsibility for maintaining the land, which would be in our ownership.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Galt.
Thank you. I'd have to ask the question, the lane runs up to another property facing a side street. That derives no benefit from this lane whatsoever? It's not required, in other words.
If you don't mind just waiting.
Thank you.
You don't think so?
No, we don't think so. We don't believe so.
Through you, if I can ask a further question. It's to do with the drain running up the lane. The likelihood of any repairs needing to be done to that, I would presume there's an easement over that land that would continue, and council, if there was any major repairs to that drain, would have to gain access to that easement. Or do we believe from experience that any work in that drain could take place from inside the drain? Sorry, it's a very engineering question.
Perhaps the first thing to say is that in coming to the proposal before you, we had to satisfy ourselves that the drain was sufficiently clear of where a dividing fence might be. And so the first point to make is that the drain is clearly accessible within the drain, and it could be done in that way. But what's proposed here is that there would be an easement which would give council access to the lane on the property itself.
Would you mind if I asked a third question and
Certainly.
final one? Just another suggestion. If we were to put it up as two halves and get to really pick up Jim's point, sorry, Councillor Park's point, if we were to offer a piece to each of the adjoining owners and only one owner took it up, could we structure the sale in such a way that it was stated from the outset that if only one owner picked up a parcel of land, that the balancing portion would be offered to the person who picked up that piece of land as a first preference?
So, if I've understood you correctly, the land would be offered to each of the abutting owners. Only one of them takes up that offer.
Yes.
The other one rejects the offer.
Yes.
And on that basis, we would go back to the owner who has taken up part of the land and offer them the balance.
That is a suggestion.
And there is nothing to prevent us from doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galt. Councillor Radders. Thank you.
Thank you. I think they've largely been answered, but if we were to support the officer's recommendation and offer it to both, is there an opportunity for them to sort it out themselves and come back to us with more or less what's being suggested, that whichever one wins the toss of the coin or however they decide to do it, we would ensure that happened? I think possibly you've answered it already, but...
Look, I think that each party has had more than ample opportunity throughout this process to contemplate a variety of different options. Their positions are quite clear, as we've heard this evening, very much aligned with those positions. So I'm not quite sure that we could reasonably expect they're going to resolve this in any other way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Park's question to the officers, if council was of a mind to pursue a variation to what the officers have recommended going for auction, what would be the recommendation? Would it be an open public auction with 2 invitees, or would it be a silent auction with the highest bid above the reserve, which I'd say the reserve would be what's in the officers' report? What would be the format?
We haven't turned our minds to that, to be fair. I think what would be important is for council to state that that is an outcome it's seeking, but in a way which leaves the officers to obtain the best advice as to how to do that. There are both practical and legal obligations in relation to how that would be done, so we would need to ensure we have proper advice. I would imagine, as a matter of principle, it would be best done by reference just to the 2 interested parties.
Yep.
I would see little point in going to a public auction for that strip of land, and so I would suggest that that's probably how we would proceed.
And just a follow-up question, just a point of clarification again. Obviously our policy, this is unusual for our policy, but it's also unusual to have 2 adjoining landowners seeking the same outcome, which is different. So it's not it wouldn't be unusual for councillors to consider it that way, to defer from the policy position?
Yes, it is. Council's consistent approach has been a division down the middle on the basis that is the fairest distribution of the land.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. The property to the northeast that Councillor Galt referred to a short time ago, 31 Shield Street, and in fact the other one to the northwest, I'm just wondering the consultation that's occurred with those landholders, as it seems apparent that they also abut the northern end of the subject site.
Sorry, no, not in relation to this option.
They've not been consulted?
No, don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
So the original closure wasn't consulted with them.
And a follow-up, if I may, Chair, when the officers are ready.
Yes, please. Councillors, would it help if you had a map of the site up to look at?
My next question will reference page 17 of 20 in the report, so that could be helpful, Chair.
To prepare. Thank you.
That's what I would have thought. I'll do it, sorry. Perhaps if I could just go back to Councillor Sinfield's question. Just to confirm that when the original discontinuance was proposed, that property owner to which you referred was notified and did not object to the closure.
Thanks.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Sinfield?
It answers the first one. I'm ready with the second when you are.
Please proceed, yes.
Thanks. Thank you, officers. So the subject site's in the centre of that picture there. To the north of the subject site, there is another parcel of land, and it cannot easily be depicted as to whether it is attached to the western side, identified by number 32, if my eyes are working, or to the eastern side, number 31 Shield Street, I think it is. Are officers aware as to where the ownership sits on that parcel of land? Quite an unusual shape, and it would have, I'm sure, been part of the extension of this site once upon a time.
We believe it's council title land in council's ownership. We're just confirming.
Thanks. Seems like a ridiculous thing to proceed with this tonight.
Assume that we don't need it, it's going to sit there until someone picks it up further down the track. Is that what you mean?
Sits there idle with How wonderful, what a great outcome. So the easement did used to run the entire way up.
I think the officers are almost ready. If we don't mind waiting just another minute, thank you.
No, but in that one block to the north, that parcel is not attached to the east or the west. Chair, if I might ask a question to the CEO while the officers are trying to ascertain the answer to this one.
Yes, I think it's a good idea, yes.
Is there any urgency attached to making a decision on this evening?
The matter has been on foot for quite some time as we've worked through the various technical issues, and I know that certainly the parties have been very keen for us to resolve this. It has been the subject of requests for us to bring this report forward so you can make a decision. So it's more a matter of the expectation of the parties. There is no other technical reason as to why it could be subject to further review. I might just make the observation the land you're referring to, I believe, has been the subject of a past closure. What you're probably looking at, and we'll wait for confirmation of this, is the remnants of that process where some land's been acquired and some land hasn't. I suspect that's what it is. It is, isn't it? It's actually in council ownership.
So to phrase this as a question rather than a statement then, perhaps either to the CEO or the CFO, would making a decision on the sale of the parcel of land that's subject to this debate tonight result in that northern parcel that we've just discussed then being landlocked from the public realm?
If the land is sold as proposed, then I believe that would be the case.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Simfield. Councillor Franco, you were next, and then Councillor Stavrou. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. My question was actually the same one that Councillor Galt asked, but I want to add a question to that point this relates to the possibility of selling a portion of the land to a neighbour if one takes up the offer and one doesn't. Does the current resolution enable that outcome to proceed? Or for that to occur, would there be a need to amend the resolution? I was reading it, I should have focused.
If you don't mind waiting a moment, Councillor Franco. Thank you.
So the resolution as it's worded will allow the parcel of land not sold to be offered to the adjoining owner.
Can I ask a follow-up? Could we assume that would occur, or would we, if that was the desire of council?
Mr. Storer.
The council intent is to dispose of the land, and we would take the opportunity to do that if the proposal failed.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Franco?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Stavrou, you've turned your light off? Yeah, okay. Councillor Park.
Could I just understand whether officers are comfortable if the land is to be offered as a single lot? Are officers comfortable with the vehicle crossover remaining? Because I think it's going to be important that that be clarified.
There are two options, I guess. When I was listening to the gentleman talking about the need for additional parking, I initially thought that was a reference to additional curbside parking. But through your clarification, it became apparent that it's the prospect of an off-street car parking space we're speaking of. And I think that if the crossover were to remain, there's a question you would have to ask as to whether you want it to be utilised in that way, in terms of the impact on the street, if there is a carport or some structure built in the frontage to accommodate that. So that's a different question which would then have to be dealt with. If there is no other reason for the crossover to become subject to a requirement that it be retained and or removed, if you like, there's flexibility as to what that decision could be. I tend to think that from a streetscape perspective, the removal of the crossing enables a much better outcome. However, if retention of the crossover was going to drive a sales outcome, which council is seeking to achieve, and to maximise the return to our ratepayers as a consequence, then I don't see any reason to insist upon the removal of the crossing.
Thank you, that's clear.
All right, thank you. Councillor Addis?
Yes, sorry to come back with more questions. Two brief ones. Is it a problem if, I mean, in a sense, the land is already landlocked, given that there's a fence, but access is a possibility. Is there a problem if it becomes more landlocked, if this becomes, you know, that little bit behind the bit we're contemplating making available? Is that a particular issue? I have a sense that we've seen other situations where that's occurred.
We have seen other circumstances of this kind, and indeed I think one of the issues we need to discuss with Council is how we deal with long-term remnants of land like this. And it may well be that in those circumstances where it's been sitting in this state for some time, that Council may wish to take a different approach to how it deals with the transfer of that land to the abutting owner. You clearly wouldn't do that unless some time had passed, because otherwise it would be an incentive to all owners not to take up the offer to purchase the land. But it is actually not very helpful to have remnants of land remaining in Council's ownership where the ability to properly maintain them is somewhat limited.
And one follow-up query. Can I just clarify that the way the motion is written would allow the crossover to either remain or be removed?
That's correct, because that the point 5 is just saying they're the reasons to sell the land in that manner. It's not saying that the crossover should remain or not remain.
Okay, thank you. And I'm happy to foreshadow a motion, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. There's no further questions. Councillors, is anyone prepared to put forward a motion? Councillor Addis.
This isn't an easy one. I'd like to test the officer's recommendation.
All right, thank you. Is there any councillor prepared to second that? Councillor Franco. Councillor Addis, would you like to, any councillors opposed to this? 2, 3, 4. All right, thank you. Councillor Addis, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, look, I probably don't feel terribly strongly either way, but I think the reason why I'm leaning towards supporting the officer's recommendation is that it follows our normal practice and it does clearly express a fairness that we're willing to share, rather than it be there's a winner and a loser. Normally it's a lot easier than this because people do see some value in having a little bit of extra land, even if it's not enormous. It gives them a bit more opportunity for planting and separation between properties. So I don't think there's an easy answer to this. I suspect no matter what we go with, there are going to be some people unhappy, but at least with the officer's motion, the suggested motion, which is my motion, it does give the property owners an option to, if they want to, sort it out between them and come to us, with us maintaining a position of fair sharing. So, yes, on that basis, I'll support this motion. I'll move it as my motion.
All right, thank you, Councillor Redders. Councillor Franco is the seconder. Would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right.
Thank you. Councillor Park.
I think it's a no-brainer here that this needs to go to an auction. I mean, I would have thought a boardroom-style auction with the two adjoining owners, and whichever one of them wants it pays the most money. That's how the market works. That's totally fair. What's going to happen otherwise, if we follow the motion that's been moved, what we end up with is a situation where one owner's made it abundantly clear that they have no interest whatsoever in a sliver of land. So all you'll do is diminish the value of the return to our ratepayers, and that would be utterly irresponsible. We've got a policy in place, but on that very screen, you've seen an example of the failed outcomes. We need to review that and how it's been put into effect. It clearly isn't working in all instances. In some instances, it works. This is one of those instances where it's not going to work. And we've got a situation where if the two owners, the two adjoining owners, are given the opportunity, it can't be fairer than that. That's the best outcome. That's how the market works. And in this situation, nobody can walk away saying, well, that was unfair, because it's utterly transparent, utterly fair. That's how it works. And if any one of you were selling your own land, that's exactly what you'd do. It's an absolute and utter no-brainer. And frankly, I think it also will yield the best result. You only needed to look at that aerial photo to see how sought after this land is. I mean, every square centimetre has been built upon.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with most of the remarks Councillor Park has just made. I'm not comfortable with the consultation, as I understand it, with the residents that abut to the north. And we may in fact find that because both 32, whatever the street is on the west, and 31 Shield Street are built boundary to boundary, they may in fact desire some rear access via this accessway, if I'm reading this correctly. So we could result in a four-way auction, frankly, not just a two-way auction. I certainly think that going to auction, either boardroom auction or a public auction for this parcel of land, would result in the best outcome for the community and test the market value of it. The other reasons that I think that it would be, this current motion on screen is not the best outcome for the community is because of the possible lack of maintenance that would result in the other portion of land to the north. The retention of the crossover may result in fewer cars on the street, which may be a better community outcome if that was to eventuate. It could take 3, 4, 5, however many cars off the street where parking is a premium, and that would result in a better outcome. So I'll leave my comments there, but I'm not particularly comfortable with the current motion on the screen.
Thank you, Councillor Finfield. Councillor Biggar.
Yes, thank you. Generally, my points have been covered by Councillor Sinfield and Councillor Park. I guess for me, there's no negative incentive here or precedent being set here, because I think that, as was said earlier by officers, it's quite rare actually that we have a situation like this where the two residents disagree and have opposing views. And I think in terms of a situation like this, in order to make it absolutely fair, an auction seems to me to be the best way. And I would agree that the retention of the crossover, I mean, could have, certainly getting rid of it could have benefits, obviously, for the road, but at the same time, were that to take those cars off the road, there's also benefits there within the parking. So I think as long as officers aren't concerned about how we would carry out something like this, and it sounds like they're not, I think that that's the most sensible approach in this particular circumstance.
Thank you. Just for clarity, can I confirm, Councillor Park, were you proposing an alternate motion if this motion fails? Thank you. Councillor, no further questions? All right, well, we'll put Councillor Franco, thank you. Oh, sorry, as the seconder, thank you.
Thank you. I've seconded the motion, but I'm very on the fence about how to go about this. I want to be clear about that. I probably will swap sides from the motion I've seconded. Look, I do accept all the points made by those who've made it clear they oppose the motion. I think an auction's clear and would avoid the issues. I like some of the aspects of the officer's recommendations, and I'm very torn. I mean, in an ideal sense, I'd almost split it down the middle and have an auction for 2 lots would be my preference, but it's getting a bit pedantic. But anyway, I'll leave it there. I'll vote in a moment.
So you're still prepared to second the motion?
Yes, I'm happy to second it, but don't assume that I'm going to vote for it.
All right, thank you. Okay. Councillors, can we please see a show of hands of who supports Councillor Addis? Oh, sorry, Councillor Addis, right of reply. Thank you.
Thank you. It's quite interesting hearing the different views, because I can certainly I can see merit in both ways of going. So I guess the irony is I'm going to stick with this motion, but I won't be all that disappointed if it fails, because I think in a sense we're all trying to just achieve a fair and good outcome. I think I do still favour this, and will still be voting in support of the motion, because in the end it gives the 2 owners an opportunity to talk amongst themselves and perhaps come back to us saying that one of them wants it, one of them doesn't. And at this stage, while one says they don't, I guess let's just see. If it was offered half each, I think it's possible. There's a fair price there that we should be happy with, and they appear to be happy with. So I think that's probably all I need to say. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Councillors, can I please see a show of hands for support of Councillor Addis's motion? Thank you. And those against? Thank you. Okay. The motion has failed, so is Councillor Park, would you like to put the motion?
Chair, I wonder if it might be prudent to move a short adjournment, perhaps for 5 to 10 minutes.
Certainly. If I could have someone else second the adjournment. No, actually, Councillor Simfield, I saw your light there. Thank you. Councillors, do you think 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Yep. Okay. All right, we'll adjourn. Please show of hands. Thank you. We have support. Councillors, could I have someone please move to open the meeting? Councillor Park, seconder Councillor Biggart. Councillor Park, you foreshadowed an alternate motion. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I did, Chair, and it's about to magically appear on the screen. The effect of it is that the parcel be offered by way of public auction.
And thank you, Councillor Park. We can see the motion on the screen now. Councillors, if you could just take 1 minute to read the motion. If I can just ask, is there anything further down or does it stop at number 4?
Keeps going down.
Keeps
No,
keeps
it's
going.
just deletions below that.
Yes.
So the substance is what's left at the top in black.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Yes, Councillor Sinfield.
This seeks to do away with any further subdivision of this parcel. It's to be sold in its totality as one parcel. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Park, are you satisfied with the...
Yeah, that's the motion. I so move.
All right, thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion?
You'll need a seconder.
Sorry, I thought we had Councillor Biggar. Yes.
That was resuming, I thought. But
sorry.
maybe I was
Thank
mistaken.
you. Thank you.
Look, I'll be brief. I think I pretty much covered off the reasons when I spoke in opposition to the previous motion. This is just a fairer approach, and one would expect will net the ratepayers a better return on the sale of their land.
Thank you. Councillor Biggar, would you like to speak? No comments? Any councillors? No. Okay. Thank you. Then we'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? And it is unanimous, so we don't need to ask those against. Thank you. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, officers. Item number 4, general business. Councillors, is there any general business? Item number 5, urgent business. No urgent business. And no confidential business. All right, thank you. Then I therefore declare this meeting closed, but as we close the meeting, I want to thank all of you that have joined us online this evening and those of you here in the gallery, and wish your family and yourself the best of health, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.